This is your daily dose of all things royal. Welcome back, my gorgeous, good-looking friends. Betrayal. Tom Bower returns 4 years after his sensational book, Revenge, with a forensic, deeply skeptical dissection of the Sussexes' post-royal trajectory. His central argument is unmistakable in this book with the majority. Harry and Meghan were never the persecuted victims they portray. Welcome back, everyone. This is the third video in my review series of Tom Bower's book, Betrayal. In this episode, we will cover chapters 7, 8, and 9, and these chapters, just to let you know, recap many of the events from the past 6 years that longtime followers like you already know too well. Material that also appeared in Tom Bower's previous book, Revenge, is predominantly laying the groundwork here in Betrayal. That being said, they provide a perfect foundation to bring new viewers fully up to speed and set the stage for everything that follows in the rest of this book. So, without further ado, let's begin with Chapter 7, titled Leaving Britain. In this chapter, Tom Bower captures the precise moment the Sussexes' war against the royal family becomes overt and irreversible. Set against the backdrop of their official South Africa tour in September 2019, Bower portrays the 10-day trip not as dutiful royal service, but as a meticulously staged platform for Harry and Meghan to launch their public grievances, monetize their victimhood, and signal their exit while still enjoying their royal perks, which I believe is what they wanted to carry out over here in the United States to enrich themselves. The implication is crystal clear here that this was no spontaneous cry for help. It was definitely premeditated, with Bower pointing at Meghan as the strategist and Harry as her willing mouthpiece, all while palace officials scrambled in vain to contain the damage. In this chapter, I don't necessarily agree with the positioning that Tom Bower is doing here. I don't believe that Meghan was alone in this plan, which Bower seems to skillfully persuade the audience into thinking. I just don't buy that Meghan was alone in coming up with this whole plan on her own just to leave because she felt like she was not getting attention. Meghan is too basic and too stupid to pull this off by herself, in my opinion. Bower opens this chapter with the Sussexes' internal chaos. We have the staff in tears, we've got resignations, including Jason Knopf and Samantha Carruthers. Then we have Meghan's alleged baby blues breakdown that was mentioned to Beth Hurley, who, by the way, is still working with the Harkles to this day. And then Harry allegedly saying he can't fix it. Archie is weaponized as a prop, no surprises, flown to South Africa despite Meghan's earlier refusal to visit the Queen at Balmoral because he was too young to fly. The tour's early success, Meghan's virtuoso speeches as a mother, as a feminist, as an advocate, blah, 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 is undercut by unreported reality. Ignored advice, staff condemnation of Meghan as a nightmare, and Harry's bombshell website statement drafted by his lawyer, David Sherborne. But what Bower does here is he lets Harry's own words condemn him. In quotes, relentless propaganda, the Diana parallel, history repeating itself, the claim that the media created lie after lie while conveniently forgetting the New York baby shower. The statement is time to hijack the tour, tainting Britain's diplomatic efforts in South Africa. The chapter's centerpiece is the ITV documentary Harry and Meghan, An African Journey, filmed by Harry's friend Tom Bradby. Instead of focusing on South African tragedies, the couple uses it for their declaration of war. Harry reveals his fractured relationship with William. We're on different paths. While a rehearsed tearful Meghan whispers about feeling vulnerable and the hard pressure of motherhood and how the British tabloids are trying to destroy her. Bower highlights her boast that she can produce tears on demand, contrasting her self-pity with the Sussexes' confidence that the tour was a success for themselves. Bower's implication throughout this chapter is the couple's defiance was not spontaneous, but definitely premeditated. They returned to Britain feeling confident and courageous, having used the tour to justify this exit. Meghan would later claim she had been silenced by the palace, yet here they had commandeered an official visit to broadcast their complaints globally. Bauer sees this as the height of ingratitude and disloyalty. Once back to London, Harry was then summoned to Buckingham Palace to face the Queen's and Prince Charles's private secretaries, Edward Young and Clive Alderton. Bauer sketches the courtiers as seasoned professionals trying, and also failing, to contain the damage. Both men urged Harry not to sue News UK. He ignored them. The Sussexes then timed the broadcast of Bradbury's documentary to coincide with William and Catherine's important official visit to Pakistan, another act Bauer frames as deliberate sabotage of the Cambridges, and even a separate documentary promoting Camilla was overshadowed. At this point, Bauer suggests the rest of the royal family had lost the benefit of any doubt about the Sussexes and even more so, Meghan. The chapter closes with the practical steps of departure already underway. Hillary Clinton visited Meghan at Frogmore and offered full-throated validation of her victim narrative, reinforcing the Sussexes' sense that they were being crushed by the institution. Now, I want to pause and talk about what Bauer said exactly about Hillary Clinton. He writes, on the 12th November, Hillary Clinton visited Meghan at Frogmore House. As Meghan unloaded her anxieties, Clinton offered her unqualified understanding. Meghan's treatment, Clinton believed, was heartbreaking and wrong. In the politician's opinion, Meghan's meteoric rise was being crushed by the royal family. The Sussexes, she believed, were struggling to have a life of meaning and integrity on their own terms. Clinton, it appeared, had willingly participated in Meghan's well-crafted choreography to escape from the royal family. This goes back to what I said earlier in this video. I don't believe that Meghan was behind this so-called plan to flee the royal family and cause so much damage without something behind her. Now, we know that Bauer is a really skilled writer, so is this a sentence that could be taken as face value, or is this something that should be looked into deeper? As it says here, Clinton, it appeared, had willingly participated in Meghan's well-crafted choreography to escape from the royal family. So again, let's apply common sense. Hillary Clinton showing up at Frogmore. Does anybody believe that this is the first time that Hillary Clinton is interacting with Meghan? She's just going to show up while Meghan is breastfeeding little baby Archie at Frogmore. I don't think so. And then to also say that she was a part of this well-crafted choreography in fleeing the royal family. This is not just a one-time conversation. What doesn't seem to be happening here is the full picture being presented. In this situation, we have Sarah Latham, who was Hillary Clinton's former campaign manager in 2016, working under John Podesta. Does anybody believe that Sarah Latham had no idea what this couple were up to and what they were planning on doing when they got to America? I highly doubt it. And then you have Heather Wong. People seem to forget that Heather Wong was hired in 2016 when Meghan suddenly came onto the scene. Heather Wong used to be a part of the Obama administration. And the big elephant in the room here that nobody wants to bridge or make the connection to here is that Hillary Clinton was a part of the Russian collusion hoax from the very beginning. And from the Durham Annex that was declassified last year shows that this is where the infrastructure now justified the means for censorship and where all of this began.
The documents contain emails, allegedly, from the senior vice president of the George Soros Open Society Foundation. He quotes a Clinton campaign advisor saying, quote, "It will be a long-term affair and to demonize Putin and Trump," and adds that, quote, "Later, the FBI will put more oil into the fire," unquote. Other emails reveal Hillary Clinton approved the idea of tying Trump and Russia to election interference. and that was a scheme hoping the allegations would distract people from her own email scandal. These documents provide clear evidence that Hillary Clinton's campaign was behind the Russia hoax and that the FBI knew what the Clinton team was up to, acknowledging that the info they were receiving about the Trump campaign may have come from the Clinton camp. Despite this, the Obama intel community forged ahead with their 2017 assessment, concluding that Russia aspired to help Trump win the election.
So all of this censorship that we have been facing is a result of that lie and these bitches. And then, like, as if it's any kind of surprise, in the book, Bauer mentions that the Columbia trip was funded by Soros. Well, duh. Soros's Open Society Foundation is funded by USAID. What are people not understanding here?
Think that their universities are just, professors teaching, teaching students about a particular topic. They don't understand that, for example, that the Harvard endowment has made a huge amount of its $50 billion by working with the U.S. State Department in foreign regime change operations. I mean, this came out in the 1990s when Jeffrey Sachs was the head of the Harvard Endowment for International Development, was personally petitioning USAID for something like $500 million to administer the economic privatization of Russia during that shock therapy period. The Harvard Endowment and George Soros's Quantum Fund were given basically a no competitor closed auction bid on the sale of those formerly Soviet government held assets, and Harvard is getting billions of dollars in grants in total from the U.S. government while they're doing favors to them. The same thing with Columbia University. The same thing with Stanford University. Americans think that the universities are something that they are. I don't want to say that they're not, but that they're only partially.
Like, it shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, as I explained in painful detail, where this money was coming from over a series of videos that I did about when Harry and Meghan went to Columbia, talking about USAID, talking about the UN and how tied all of these organizations and where the money would be coming from. You've all been looking at this pretty picture now for several years. It has been identified that Harry and Meghan are connected to George Soros and Open Society. So I'm just curious, is anybody going to call Tom Bauer now a conspiracy theorist, or am I going to get an apology? So now getting back to what Tom Bauer is saying here in this book about Hillary being a part of this well-crafted choreography doesn't mean that she showed up at Frogmore just once and they said, oh yeah, maybe you should do this and that was it. Hillary Clinton, no doubt, helped Harry and Meghan set up Archwell exactly like the Clinton Foundation. Who did she have help do it? Sunshine Sachs. Remember, Ken Sunshine is really good friends with Hillary Clinton. And in an article, it was mentioned that Sunshine Sachs was going to be helping with the Archwell charity endeavor. But then even more damning here is Archwell's ties to Teneo. You know, the firm that Doug Band and Declan Kelly launched back in 2011. Oh, you don't know who Doug Band is? Well, Doug Band was Bill Clinton's deputy assistant, who also was tied to Jeffrey Epstein. I'm not going to get into that now, but scandal looms around this guy as well as this company called Teneo with Hillary Clinton and the State Department. So we're supposed to believe that even though Archwell hired this firm to help them with their so-called charity, and Hillary Clinton visiting Frogmore just once, just to see how Meghan's doing, dropping in. And then on top of it, Sunshine Sachs being a part of the so-called engine and helping this charity get off the ground, that no funny business is going on here, and that Megxit was all Meghan's idea. Driven because she didn't want to be part of the team, and that she was never going to be queen, and she never wanted to have a life of service without getting paid or being able to monetize. Are we really going to believe that this is the whole reason why Meghan was so selfish that she picked Harry up and left just in time for the 2020 election? But I digress. Back to this chapter and closing chapter 7 out. Bauer closes this chapter out by framing that this South Africa tour was the Sussex's dress rehearsal for Megxit, a final royal-funded platform to burn bridges while plotting their Hollywood reinvention. Chapter 7 is made the tipping point. The moment leaving Britain stops being a threat and becomes the actual plan, and Bauer leaves the reader with no doubt. This was not an escape from persecution. It really was a calculated, self-serving abandonment of duty. So now we're going to move into Chapter 8, titled Sandringham. Tom Bauer turns the January 2020 family summit at the Queen's estate into a tightly scripted courtroom drama where this is the monarchy's last doomed attempt to contain the Sussexes before they officially walked away. Bauer begins this chapter with the Sussexes' pre-summit maneuvers, quoting Harry's leaked email to Charles, drafted with Meghan's input, of course, and their Vancouver hideaway briefings that they plan to quote-unquote, establish a presence in a Commonwealth country, so Meghan could resume her business activities. The Queen, Bauer reveals, had already been briefed by Ottawa that the couple were never coming back because they took the dogs. Yet, she still convenes the summit in the hopes of damage limitation. Harry's fury at the three middle-aged white men, the private secretaries, known as Edward Young, Clive Alderton, and Simon Case, is quoted at length from Spare, complete with his childish nicknames, the Fly, the Wasp, and the Bee. Bauer here lets Harry's petulance speak for itself, and the prince, who once served in the army, now treats senior courtiers like enemies for simply doing their jobs. The summit is the centerpiece of this chapter, and Meghan is deliberately excluded from the in-person meeting because nobody trusts her not to record it for future profit or leaks, joining only by Zoom from Canada. Now, what's really interesting here with Tom Bauer and this chapter is that he took what Harry and Meghan said in their Netflix mockumentary, where Harry describes that there were 5 proposals laid out for Harry to pick, and option 3, which was the half in, half out, was the one that they wanted. What I don't understand is, why is Tom Bauer using this as fact? Yes, he's using Harry and Meghan's truth, but many people who don't know this story or not familiar with this story will go on to believe that there were 5 options that were presented to Harry when we know that that was not true. The Queen was adamant that there would be no half in, half out option for them. She knew that it would be murky if they merged their commercial endeavors with doing a life of duty serving the Queen, and she didn't want to get wrapped up in any of that. What I don't get is, why didn't Bauer challenge this? Because it leaves the reader, who may not be familiar with this story, to be under the impression that Harry was given 5 options and the palace reneged. He chose option 3 and the palace said, no, you can't have it, even though it was offered to him. Now, what concerns me is Bauer is using Harry's own words from his Netflix documentary as well as Spare, while we know that there's inconsistencies. But if you're not following this story and you think that this is a good book because it has everything cataloged, you wouldn't necessarily know that what Harry said with receiving 5 options and he picked number 3, the half in, half out model, when we know that that was not an option that the Queen was going to give the couple, then you would believe that the palace was just being downright nasty and were against the Sussexes. Yeah, I would have liked to have seen Tom Bauer add a little more color to this, because it's not so clear that there was no 5 options. There really was only 2 options. You were either in or you were out. There was no in between. But anyway, the outcome was option 5, full severance, loss of HRH or put in abeyance, ban on commercial use of titles. But looking back, Harry and Meghan didn't really keep to their promise. They just didn't. And when we think about Harry being over here in the United States, who's to say that internal documents with our government doesn't say HRH? Remember, everything that we've been told has been through the media. The Queen's public statement is characteristically compassionate yet firm, where she uses words like "my family," "much-loved members." But Harry explodes when Kensington Palace issues a joint rebuttal to the bullying claims in both brothers' names. Bauer's implication here, he says, the Sussexes arrived demanding to have it both ways, royal status without royal rules, and when they didn't get it, they framed the institution as cold and vindictive. Yeah, I think Bauer's writing here is effective in the way that he contrasts the Sussex's ultimatums and leaks with the courtier's caution, and then pairing it with the Queen's quiet dignity. He notes the palace's earlier failures, such as ignoring Knopf's bullying memos and obeying royal orders from Harry to avoid any kind of escalation, and then, worst of all, underestimating Meghan as this divisive agent. You see what we have here, the result is that the institution truly did bend over backwards to accommodate them, only to be outmaneuvered by two people who really had no plans to stay at all, so they didn't care. And that's the thing I think the palace couldn't grasp or wrap their heads around, that they never had any intention to try and make it work. Well, at least we can say that for Meghan. I do believe that her intention was never to stay there. It was always to come back to the United States and support the Democrat Party. By the end of this chapter, we have now the public divided, which I think was purely intentional. Some see ingratitude, others see racism, and the Sussexes immediately weaponize both reaction. Bauer's deeper thesis here shines through without him ever needing to spell it out. That Sandringham was not the moment the monarchy forced Megxit on Harry and Meghan. It was the moment they forced the monarchy's hand while already planning their Hollywood pivot. The Queen's reluctance for confrontation, the private secretary's deference, and the family's lingering hope that Harry could be saved all combined to hand the Sussexes exactly what they wanted, which was a clean break on their terms, complete with the victim narrative intact. And we saw when they left, Harry and Meghan had all the support in the world from the United States. Now, if you could possibly take your mind back to that time, if you were in the United States, we never saw what was going on in the UK. The media here was tightly controlled, and we had no idea that technically this so-called control of the mainstream media was being controlled by the left. I mean, I don't think I actually acknowledged it until I started watching independent media. So the perspective of what was going on here in the United States was very different in how we saw this couple. Now, from my perspective, I didn't buy this act from the beginning. There was always something that just didn't sit right with me, and I think many of you thought the same. But at the same time, not many people were talking about it. So whatever we were seeing here was just like, oh, we didn't think much that there was all of this going on behind it. All of this manipulation and deceit. I mean, who really thought about that? I didn't. And I think it was when the Oprah interview aired and America saw with their own eyes that this woman was up there talking about something that internally you just didn't believe, and calling out the hypocrisy and calling out the conflicting stories, and more people starting to look at this a little bit differently. But it still wasn't reflected in the media. The optics of, oh, Harry and Meghan are still the darlings of the United States. Even though we knew that many people didn't feel that way, it was still being promoted as such. And there was no bad press for Harry and Meghan. And if there was, you were silenced, crushed, censored. And that's what we all went through. This was the age of cancel culture. Remember, Piers Morgan got fired because he said he didn't believe that she was suicidal. The Sussexes left, technically on a high, in their eyes. Now, moving into the last chapter that we're going to review today, Chapter 9, titled Freedom, Tom Bauer, within this chapter, now delivers almost a contemptuous account of the Sussexes' first weeks and months after Sandringham. Bauer opens up this chapter with a telling vignette at Heathrow's Windsor Lounge, Harry waiting for his flight back to Vancouver, while Meghan is already confirming Netflix deals and a 3-book memoir contract through WME. The timing, right there, was everything. Within days of the Sandringham agreement, the couple are secretly lining up $20 million plus deals. Bauer then proceeds to insert this against their public farewells, the staged Hollywood-style photo ops, and the tense Commonwealth Day service, then drops Meghan's curated elegy to the Daily Mail. I gave up my entire life for this family. He doesn't need to call it laughable. I mean, the reader does feel the absurdity of all of it. Yeah, and this is why I think the whole thing is a scam, because when you look at all the inconsistencies and the lies from all around, not just Harry and Meghan, you start to think that, well, we're the fools. We're the fools who fell for all of this shit. Yeah, with Harry denouncing Thomas Markle for selling stories while signing up for a ghostwritten tell-all. You have Meghan lamenting her father's interviews while scheduling her own with Oprah, Vogue, and Netflix. And every promise made at Sandringham is discarded before the ink is actually dried, okay? Now, throughout this chapter, Bauer does a really good job at showing the double standards between buying the $14.65 million Montecito mansion and then later telling Oprah that he was a pauper because his father cut him off. And the sense of entitlement is pretty consistent in all the actions of Harry and Meghan. Like, take for instance in this paragraph, it says, unconcerned about Harry's promises in Sandringham not to financially exploit his family, Meghan ordered Archewell to be rebranded Sussex.com with the coat of arms granted to her by the Queen. Their website was headed The Office of Prince Harry and Meghan, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. Harry would claim that Sussex was their family name, but he knew that that was untrue. Archie's birth certificate accurately recorded their family surname as Mountbatten Windsor. Archewell would need to raise $100 million to rank as an effective Hollywood foundation. And this is the point that I've always made from the beginning with Archewell, and the reason why I always say Archewell Fugazi Public Charity, because that's what it is. It's a public charity. It's not a foundation. In the past, I have talked about the differences between a foundation and a public charity. With a foundation, you don't have to be as transparent as you have to be with a public charity, but you don't get the same tax breaks. And in this case, I believe that Meghan likes to call Archewell, or in the past, before it became Archewell Fugazi Public Philanthropies, she called it Archewell Foundation because she wants people to think that she's on the same level as like the Gates Foundation, the Clinton Foundation, Obama Foundation, and that it has like hundreds of millions of dollars in it. But Archewell, Fugazi Public Charity, really was like any other NGO in this whole scam network. In addition, Meghan Markle thought that the public was stupid, and by calling it a foundation, then she too didn't have to be transparent with what the so-called public charity was doing. In essence, Archewell was behaving like a foundation, but reaping the tax benefits of a public charity. Now, in this chapter, Bauer goes into the Zoom sessions that Harry had with ghostwriter J.R. Moehringer for his book Spare, spilling the information about the drugs, his virginity loss, the penis anecdotes, and vendettas against Camilla, Charles, Kate, and William. The New York editors were gleeful at the blockbuster potential with everything that was coming out about Harry's drug use. It was one bombshell after another, and the editors thought that this was a good idea, not for Harry, but for their pockets. They're paying Harry $20 million, so obviously Harry had to sing for his supper. They weren't thinking about the future and how this was going to come back to bite Harry. They didn't care. And neither did the good wife Meghan, because she's a greedy little you-know-what. Now, I do think that Bauer is really effective here in showing this double standard with Harry and Meghan by using their own words against them. When he talks about Meghan's miscarriage, this is what he had to say. Yet their journey to freedom took an unprecedented turn when, on the first morning after they moved into their new Montecito home, Meghan suffered a miscarriage. Harry publicly asserted that the cause was the Mail on Sunday's publication of Meghan's letter to her father, and in fact, she had subsequently taken legal action against them, accusing the newspaper of misuse of private information and infringement of copyright. Yet, however sad the reality of losing a child, Harry's is a fairly wild accusation given that about 20% of pregnancies end in miscarriages, and perhaps of more relevance, Harry did not reveal that Meghan suffered from preeclampsia, a complication during her first pregnancy that causes high blood pressure and can lead to serious complications. Now, this last line, pay attention. And moreover, at the time of the miscarriage, Meghan anticipated outright victory in her litigation. Now, for those who are familiar with this saga, you would know that at the time, Meghan was expecting them to give her a settlement and close out, because this was the name of the game with filing all of these lawsuits against these newspapers, hoping that they will not go to trial and just settle. This is what these two grifters were trying to do and are still doing with Harry and the Daily Mail. And in Meghan's case, they didn't want to settle, and there was a date scheduled for whether it be a trial or discovery or something was to be presented. But around that time, Meghan and her lawyers asked for a meeting with the judge, and all of a sudden now there was a postponement. So it's my belief that Meghan lied about this miscarriage, lied to the judge, asking for some type of postponement in order to buy herself some time. Why don't we go ahead and refresh our memory of what went down? Back in 2022, I went ahead and covered this, and here's what I said.
I am writing more things to battle the Mail and their insanity.
It appeared that Meghan was more upset that the Mail Online was making money off of her than the actual court case itself, challenging her bullshit argument of this being about privacy. This last episode was all smoke and mirrors. This is all to cover up their tracks around the court case, the lies surrounding the miscarriage, and the lies surrounding Lilibet. We're going to go out of order for a second so this can make sense. Later in the episode, Harry makes this statement and accuses the Mail Online of,
I believe my wife suffered a miscarriage because of what the Mail did. I watched the whole thing.
Meghan wants you to believe that this court case was driven by the Mail on Sunday because they wanted clicks and to make money. Okay?
Let's create an entire tab on our homepage with her name and just run constant stuff on this litigation and twist and turn things to create an implant with members of the public.
Meghan, just shut up. Please, just shut up.
That's all this is about. Just apologize and don't do it again. It's really that simple. But instead it's like, or let's make a fortune.
Let me refresh everybody's memories. And for those that don't know, here's a little bit of education on how this court case went down. So in October of 2019, it was Meghan who raised the argument to sue the Mail Online for this letter situation.
That's all this is about. Just apologize and don't do it again.
Well, that's funny. The money-hungry D-list actress forgot to ask for the apology in her claimant claims. Instead, she was only asking for money, such as damages, other compensation, covering the costs of her legal fees. I mean, pain and suffering. I don't see asking for an apology anywhere. So let's throw that lie out the window. Next.
Defense says, we'd like disclosure from you. We need to access your email and your phone for this case based on these terms. I love you. Archie. Kate. William.
Africa.
Africa?
Why is she acting like she's hearing voices in her head? Does she not realize how stupid she looks?
Sorry, what? What does that have to do with this lawsuit?
Well, Meghan, aside from you pulling this out of your ass, let me remind you of what really happened. For a person who insists that she was the smart one, all of a sudden now she's playing dumb. So the defendant, which was the Mail Online, in their skeleton argument dated January 2021, keep that date in mind, in this document, the defendant, Mail Online, decides to lay out in chronological order the events that have taken place. So, in the initial submission, Meghan made allegations that she did not give substantiated evidence to back it. So, the Mail Online had requested via RFI, request for information, for her to provide that information. The argument that the Mail on Sunday had here was that they were alleging that Meghan gave the letter to People magazine. So back on June 30th, 2020, a third RFI was requested to ask her if she had given this letter to People, in which, of course, they came back denying it. And the reason why they asked that question was because there was a line in the article that came directly from the letter. So how would People magazine have quoted something that was from the letter if they weren't given the letter? And for those that don't remember, this is what happened.
For good, and they find one piece, and then it becomes this whole other thing.
If they were trying not to fool people, they would have highlighted instead the quoted sentence, which said, "Dad, I'm so heartbroken. I love you. I have one father. Please stop victimizing me through the media so we can repair our relationship." Now that was in the letter. Now they want your eyes fixated on she wrote him a letter and assume that that was all that was written about this letter and why it was taken out of context. So if Meghan's telling the truth, what's there to be stressed about? I mean, it's her lawsuit suing the Mail on Sunday. She could have easily backed out, but she didn't. And at this point, the Mail on Sunday is not making any traction. Their last resort was making a request to know the 5 friends who talked in that article. Unfortunately, they didn't get their way, and the judge denied it to keep their names private. The case was looking good for Meghan. At any point, she could have dropped out. But as we all know, that she has told the world that she had a miscarriage in the month of July 2020. When you're telling the truth, you really have nothing to worry about. So just as Meghan was thinking that she was going to get away with it, come August 2020, where Finding Freedom drops. And this is what pissed Meghan off, because it was the Mail on Sunday who decided to amend its case to rely on Meghan's involvement with the book, namely that Meghan and her husband cooperated with the authors to put out their version of events by the means of this book. The assertion further supports the case made in the original defense that Meghan had herself put information of a personal nature, including information about the existence and content of the letter, into the public domain. And that was the argument. Now, let's not forget that she had Omid Scobie and Jenny Afia write a witness statement saying that she had no involvement with this book. I guess perjury is not taken very seriously in the UK, and that even a barrister, I think that's what Jenny Afia is, or lawyer, is held accountable. So at this point, a lot of shucking and jiving had been going on with Meghan after she realizes that the defense may have additional information that could expose her, such as information from Jason Knopf.
I'm driving up just like, all right, we're going to unpack, we're going to get settled. And Meg is standing outside waiting for me because here's our new home. But she's like, I'm having a lot of pain.
Just to confirm, this is the month of July when they moved.
She was holding Archie and she just fell to the ground. And the first morning that we woke up in our new home is when I miscarried.
The way that I interpret it, and assuming this is the way everybody else is interpreting it, is that that morning she miscarried. Abigail was there. They were supposed to unpack, and this is what happened. Okay. They quickly show Meghan typing or somebody typing. This was the article that she wrote for the New York Times, The Losses We Share. So at this time, when they're talking about her writing this article, and everyone is talking about how brave she was to talk about it. And just right before that, Harry put the blame on the Daily Mail for putting so much stress on his wife that they were the ones that caused this miscarriage. And at this point, you forget about her friend Abigail. Shall we go down memory lane and read what the brave Duchess wrote? I'll just give you the first 2 paragraphs. It was a July morning that began as ordinarily as any other day. Make breakfast, feed the dogs, take vitamins, find that missing sock, pick up the rogue crayon that rolled under the table, throw my hair in a ponytail before getting my son from his crib. After changing his diaper, I felt a sharp cramp. I dropped to the floor with him in my arms, humming a lullaby to keep us both calm. The cheerful tune, a stark contrast to my sense that something was not right. I knew as I clutched my firstborn child that I was losing my second. Putting aside that the rest of this article was bullshit, I thought Abigail was the one that saw you clutch your stomach with Archie and drop to the floor. Did I hear that right?
Because here's our new home, but she's like, I'm having a lot of pain.
Wait a minute. I thought she was finding crayons that rolled under the table and picking up that sock.
She was holding Archie and she just fell to the ground. And
so you watched her drop to the floor singing a lullaby, holding her first child as she was losing her second? I wonder how much they paid her for this Oscar-worthy performance. Please. So now you understand why I believe that this miscarriage was a lie and it was used to buy some time for this court case. And as a result of Meghan and Harry's sloppiness in this mockumentary, they have now opened up more room for speculation surrounding the validity and truth around Lily's birth and conception. Now, as I have mentioned a few times now in the tactics and manipulation of this series, they did a doozy on the audience with this one. So let me explain what we're looking at. So here is Meghan. She's in bed somewhere, looking at her computer and working on the court case. And here's what she says.
To battle the male and their insanity.
So let's pay attention closely to what she's wearing. She's wearing a black hoodie with a specific type of logo on the front. She has her jewelry on, and most notably, she has that blood diamond pinky ring on from the Saudis.
They're saying this was all part of my strategy and tactic to have a better reputation.
Keep that little nugget of information in the back of your head for just a moment. So right after this scene, they then distract the audience with more of their babbling. But then, a little bit later on, they show this scene.
My darling wife has just been sent the skeleton argument of the ridiculousness of the male case.
So for those that don't know what a skeleton argument is for the UK, we don't have them here. I don't believe we do in our judicial system. But skeleton arguments are documents filed with the court and exchanged between the parties in advance of a court hearing. Now, for this situation, Meghan's looking at a skeleton argument. And here is where she's now going to get caught in a massive lie. So when this was going on, the skeleton argument that went out between the two parties was issued on January 14, 2021, in preparation for a court hearing on January 19th, 2021. So what people need to understand is that this was a hearing so they could plead their case so the judge could move to a summary judgment. This is something that Meghan now was pushing forward for because she realized that there's a lot of dirt on her that she possibly could be exposed for. And that's why now it shifted. So this actual hearing was bringing the Mail on Sunday and Meghan together to say, look, no, we need to go full on trial because there's a lot of skeletons in the closet that need to be outed. And this is what Meghan was fighting against. She now wanted to make this a quick done deal with the information that they already had so she could, let this kind of go now. But the Mail on Sunday was not having it. They were going full force now.
Archie wasn't even born when you guys published the letter that I wrote to my dad.
They are making a fortune.
So what I want you to take away from this clip is to pay attention to what she's wearing. Does that sweatshirt look familiar? Does that jewelry look familiar? And it looks like she's wearing shorts. So after that scene, further down in the video, we then see them pick back up and we see Big Sur, California, September 17th, 2020. Initially, there's nothing really special about this day. I mean, in some cases throughout this docuseries, they didn't put the full date. They would just put the month and the year, like what they did with the New York trip. They want you to know that date. Folks, pay attention to what Meghan is wearing. Have we seen that sweatshirt before? Have we seen that jewelry before? Have we seen those sunglasses before? Now, if you use logic, this looks like this was the same day. And exactly what I had said earlier, they took footage and they chopped it up and spread it out across the episodes. Now, what's interesting here is that they did this in order to manipulate the public into thinking that on September 17, 2020, she announced that she was pregnant. Now, if you do the math, 9 months forward brings you into June. And who came along in June? Allegedly, Lilibet. See, the date can't be September 17, 2020, because she was looking at the skeleton argument in the car, and that was issued on January 14, 2021. So now you have to take a look at what was the weather like in Santa Barbara the week of January 14th. And I'll tell you this, it kind of goes along the lines with what she's wearing, especially, in the height of the day. You're almost up to 70 degrees. She's got blankets in her hand, Looks like maybe the temperature will drop. Highly possible that this was January in Santa Barbara, which now we're going to look at this scene where it was placed earlier in the episode to make you think that Meghan was so stressed out in the months up to before she had this miscarriage.
Awake, unable to sleep, thinking about this case and the wider issues and the toll it was taking.
You see, what they're not telling you is that Meghan was not compliant. She had been ignoring due dates and she had been dragging her feet on giving information. So clearly, as you can see here, it said that it took them 19 requests for information. And then when they finally were able to get information, it was due because the court had ordered her to serve her re-amended reply. And she was delayed by 5 weeks, literally dragging her feet. So November 13 was the deadline, but then she didn't abide by that either and decided November 15th was when she was going to submit all her stuff. So what we're seeing here in that little clip is Meghan hustling to get this stuff done. And interestingly enough, well, one, it's November, and two, there's a wine glass sitting next to her. So what does that tell you? If she was supposed to be pregnant in September, she shouldn't be drinking, right? I want to conclude with just reiterating that this is just speculation. There's no evidence or confirmation saying that this is fact, but based off of the information that is publicly available out there on the web, such as those court documents, that has helped me fill in some of the gaps to the content that these two have put out and wanting the world to believe. My opinion is, one, she did not have a miscarriage based off of the holes that we poked in that story. That was an excuse to buy time for this court case. Now then, two, this puts into question the validity on was she pregnant in September? And my opinion is that no, she wasn't. And I think this whole thing is a big con and a big scam. Many of you may say, oh, no, it's just a big conspiracy. But no, I'm a realist. Show me evidence otherwise, and I'm open to listen. But the fact that they have failed to show us evidence, maybe they are the conspiracy theorists. Maybe they want to fool the world. Have we thought about that? They live in their own land of make-believe, so could it be possible that they made this up? Absolutely. When you lie this much, people have to question it, So now getting back to this, is Tom Bauer telling us something here in this last line? And moreover, at the time of the miscarriage, Meghan anticipated outright victory in her litigation? You see, he doesn't explain any more after this, but for those that are in the know of this saga, like how we know it, you can see maybe it's possible that he's giving us a clue there, but I would love to know your thoughts on this one. We're going to go ahead and stop here. I will be back soon with looking at the next chapter in this book. So if you like this video, please go ahead and make sure you're subscribed and you have your notification bell on to be notified of the next release. But definitely let me know your thoughts below. As always, I will be back with more content. But until then, please be safe, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Such a fraud.